Dzień dobry, witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie na kolejnym wydarzeniu organizowanym przez Regionalny Ośrodek Debaty Międzynarodowej, którego siedziba mieści się w Toruniu, ale który swoim zasięgiem obejmuje województwa kujawsko-pomorskie oraz wielkopolskie. Jest to inicjatywa wspólna z Instytutem Nauk o Polityce Akademii Kultury Społecznej i Medialnej w Toruniu oraz także z naszym zaprzyjaźnionym Uniwersytetem Filipińskim, Papieskim i Królewskim Uniwersytetem Świętego Tomasza w Manili. Nasz dzisiejszy gość jest ekspertem, profesorem tegoż uniwersytetu, zatem ze względu na kwestie tłumaczeniowe, myślę, że wygodniej będzie, jeśli teraz przejdziemy na język angielski. Dear Professor Felipe Salvasa II, thank you very much that you accepted our invitation. So I represent the Polish society, Polish nation. So greetings from Polish side.
Greetings, dzień dobry to everyone watching. Good day to the audience. Thank you, Professor Christian, for inviting me into this important virtual forum to discuss the pressing issues of the day.
Dear Professor, today we have a very important topic. The topic for the discussion is concentrated about the aspect of the changing of the United States strategic priorities and the reshaping of the global security orders, but not typically from the scientific point of view, but rather we will talk about the perspective from Europe and the perspective from the Indo-Pacific region. But at the beginning, Professor, please be so kind and say a few words about your area of expertise, your experience.
All right, my name is Felipe Salvosa II. I am a faculty member of the Department of Journalism of the University of Santo Tomas. The journalism department is housed within the Liberal Arts College of the university. This is called the Faculty of Arts and Letters. It is the oldest liberal arts college in the Philippines, within the oldest Catholic university, the oldest university in Asia. I used to be a journalist. I worked as a journalist full-time before transferring to the academe. I was a reporter, researcher, associate editor, research head, and managing editor for a number of publications. So I worked for the Business World, the business newspaper. I worked for the Financial Times. I worked for the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and now I work full-time in the University of Santo Tomas. I continue to have a journalistic practice as the editor of Press1.ph, which is a newsroom focused on fact-checking and disinformation research. We are a verified signatory of the International Fact-Checking Network. No, I'm also the president of the Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Professor Felipe, for this introduction and short brief about your area of science. Today, we will discuss the changing strategic priorities which we see according to the United States activities and their impact on the evolving global security order. As geopolitical tensions intensify and the international systems becomes increasingly complex, questions about the future of transatlantic relations, the role of Europe, and the growing importance of the Indo-Pacific region have become central to the global security debates. Today, we will explore how shifts in the United States strategy are reshaping security dynamics in both Europe and the Indo-Pacific, as well what these changes may mean for the future international order. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. Let me begin with the first question. In your opinion, as a journalist, as the professor, how would you describe the current shift in the United States strategic priorities in the global security order?
From the journalistic perspective, we can point out the obvious refocusing of the U.S. Priorities, no, towards domestic concerns in at the beginning of the Trump administration, but also towards some long-standing security concerns, no? And as exemplified by Iran. And also a long-standing desire to return the United States to a position of great influence, no, in the global stage. And that has huge implications for us here, no, in Southeast Asia. As we know, the United States in recent years articulated its strategy anchored on an Indo-Pacific concept, no. But when we talk about the Indo-Pacific concept, what is the core, no, of Indo-Pacific? The core of Indo-Pacific is none other than Southeast Asia, no, because Southeast Asia basically is an important passageway, no, important passageway, important for freedom of navigation, no? Important in the sense of trade, no? So a significant proportion of global trade passes through Southeast Asia. And we also have to, when you talk about freedom of navigation, global trade, no, this is where important concepts of rule of law, the importance of the UNCLOS, no, the importance of trade rules, no, the importance of international law, no, uh, goes back to the fore, no. So Southeast Asia is not a place, no, that is to be ignored, no. It's a very strategic place. It is an important component, no, of the whole Indo-Pacific concept, no, that we are talking about.
Of course, we are talking about the transatlantic or Indo-Pacific relations, but of course, we have to a little think about the rise of China and the place of China in this global puzzle which we see in this moment. So, is this shift primarily driven by the rise of China or by a broader structural changes in the global politics?
I think the answer is both. Um, However, we have to look into the reality of the Southeast Asian states, no, not wanting to be caught, no, in the crossfire of competing powers, no. So the US wants to assert its dominance in the region, while China, wants to become, wants to control the sea lanes, the important trade routes, and wants to become important, not just economically, but also when it comes to when we talk in geopolitical terms. So remember, these Southeast Asian states are um, when you combine the population of Southeast Asia, it's larger than Europe, no? And it's an important market, for products. It is also an important exporter, no? We want to sell products to the Western world. We want to be friends with the United States. We want to be friends with Europe, but we also do not want to antagonize our next door neighbor. No, we don't want to antagonize China. No, we welcome very much the investments, the tourism, by our neighbors, not just China, but also Japan and Korea. So how to navigate, no, these relations, and many of these relations go back to history, so the Philippines used to be a colony, used to be under a Commonwealth, under the United States. So there's a very strong relationship between the Philippines and the United States. And yet we also have strong historical trade ties with China. No, there are a lot of Chinese investments in the Philippines. There's a lot of Filipino investments, no, in mainland. No, uh, so therefore, it is in the best interest of the Philippines and the region for an orderly to arrive at a peaceful and orderly consensus, no, on how to solve all of these how to deal with these competing interests, no, in the region.
Of course, during the many discussions, we are talking about the security and security challenges. In your opinion, Europe and Indo-Pacific region, and of course, according to the Indo-Pacific region, we have to also thinking about the Southeast Asia. Uh, this parallel security and security challenges are fundamentally different, or in general, we should try to find the links between our regions and together try to find the place and to secure our situation, secure our stabilization.
We have to um, pursue many alternative venues, no, to try to um, thresh out our concerns, to try to resolve all of our differences, no. So in political science, Dr. Christian, you talk a lot about soft power, right? And I think soft power has very huge potential, no. Not to just assert dominance of one culture over the other, but also to promote greater understanding, no. So in we have seen how effective people to people relationships are, no, when it comes to bringing people closer together and bringing people to work with each other. Tourism, I think, it has a huge potential, you know, and uh, it can help Southeast Asia, no, economically, but it can provide as an alternative, you know, an alternative destination, that people from Central Europe may be interested, to explore new destinations, new culture, new food, you know, and in the process, creating a greater understanding, of what Southeast Asia is, and as well as educating Southeast Asia about what Central Europe is, no? And the place of both important regions, no, in global trade, in global security, no. So there are many. I think we should explore whatever areas are available, no, to promote greater understanding, and when our peoples, interact, they will always find commonality, commonality in history, commonality in culture, no, uh, and therefore we achieve a greater peace, greater stability, instead of perpetuating another another Cold War. We don't want to go back to that kind of situation, where there are severe tensions, uh, when there are cracks in the global order. God forbid, we don't want to create walls, between our regions, Uh, Perhaps we can navigate, this challenging global terrain, in ways that are in ways that our predecessors no have not done, but certainly learning from their experiences.
I think most of the experts underline from the geopolitics, geostrategy, political science, that probably the rivalry between United States and China during the next years will be much bigger because of the many things, different opinions, different point of views, different economical situation. In your opinion, how does the United States and China rivalry reshape Japan, Indo-Pacific, Southeast Asia security environment simultaneously?
Well, very that's very challenging question. Um, I will answer from the Philippine case um, because that is what I'm more familiar with. In the Philippines, when we talk about geopolitics, in many instances, we cannot separate it from the desire of China to expand its role in the region, to the extent of to the extent of claiming ownership, of important features in the South China Sea, which, however, encroach upon the maritime entitlements of not just the Philippines, but also other countries in the region like Vietnam, Malaysia, even Brunei, and of course uh, Taiwan, the renegade province of China. Um, we have seen the Philippines assert its its maritime in its exclusive economic zone as upheld by 2016 arbitration ruling, which upheld the Philippines maritime entitlements under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So in this issue, we have seen the support, no, of a number of important allies, in the West, including Australia and countries in Europe, because, as I said earlier, this touches upon important concepts in international law, and in the rule of law, Um, this dispute over maritime claims, in this part of the world, they deserve to have uh, a global spotlight, because if these maritime rights, cannot be enforced for smaller countries like the Philippines, how can it be enforced in other parts of the world? So that is why it is important for this dispute, between the Philippines and neighboring countries versus China. It's important that this be resolved um, in the context of international law, in the context of rule of law, no, and in the context of being 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 part of the global system, being part of the global order, no a country that has respect for the rights of others, um because otherwise, I don't know how do we proceed, if if there are no rules, no if there's no certainty, there's no rules based order, I think it would be very difficult, it would be a very difficult phase, if we start abandoning, no these long held, no long held international order, long held international rules, and norms and practices, uh, we don't want to return to that to an old system, no, where countries just take claim on territory of another, no, and smaller states cannot do anything, are powerless, no, um, powerless, and they are occupied against their will. I think Poland is familiar with this.
Yes, yes, we are familiar. Uh, but let's return to the Filipino situation. I had
Mm,
opportunity to see how beautiful is your country.
mm.
I saw how potential your people has through they work. They work very hard. In your opinion, private opinion, according to the current chaotic time, Philippines has a potential to be one of the global leader, one of the global key player.
Yes, the Philippines has a very young and dynamic population. No, our population, if you look at the absolute number, it's huge, more than 100 million. You immediately you will see images, no, of the so-called third world with its crowded cities, no, um, and bursting infrastructure, no, lack of effective mass transit systems, no. But what could be viewed as a weakness can also be seen as our strength, no. Our our median age is between 26 and 27 years old, no. We have an English speaking workforce, no. We have a very adaptable mindset, no. You can spot a Filipino, no, in many countries in the world, no, working hard, no, in whatever field, no, whether in health services, no, teaching, manual labor, no, domestic labor, in factories, in ships, in hospitals, no, uh, in many places, even in missionary outposts all over the world, you can see Filipinos there. I think um, our youth, our dynamism, our ability to assimilate into other cultures, our Christian faith, no, can be our assets, no. And we have a track record in this, no. So we are among the biggest uh, receiving countries in terms of remittances, no. So we get remittances to the tune of $30 billion or more every year, which we have used as a buffer in times of crisis. No? So this foreign exchange helps us in our current account. No, despite our trade deficit in terms of trade in goods. No, this is somehow eased by the remittances that we receive from the 10 million or so Filipinos scattered all over the world, no, sending money every month to their families, no, helping their children finish education, helping their families acquire homes, no, or pool savings, no, or pay for important things like healthcare, no. So um, I think Filipinos will help uh, the West, that of course that includes Europe, in infusing a new vigor, no, youth, dynamism, industry, no, in uh, in societies in the West, no, that may be experiencing the phenomenon, unavoidable phenomenon of aging, no. So I hope there will be even more opportunities, no, that could open to Filipinos, no. So perhaps at some point we can solve the language barrier, no. Uh, if one exists, no. Uh, because Filipinos can, ano, Filipinos can help other countries in terms of solving their manpower issues, no? And perhaps help ease the problem of declining populations, no? Um, because people might ask, what is the Philippines' greatest export? Actually, the answer to that is people, no? The number one export of the Philippines is people. We used to make a joke out of that, no? But on the other hand, I think we have to embrace it. We have to embrace it, no? Because we're not only export, we might not be, we're exporting our culture. We're exporting our Filipino brand of service, and we're exporting our Filipino values and hospitality to the world. We want the world to experience more of what we have to offer.
I totally agree with you, Professor Felipe, that Poland Filipino has a lot of common, and together we have to also think how to secure our future, because future for our next generation is very important. Thank you very much, Professor Felipe Salvasa II, for being with us and sharing with us the knowledge and the experience which you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Christian.
A Państwu dziękuję za uwagę, dziękuję za oglądanie i zapraszam na kolejne wydarzenia organizowane wspólnie przez RODM Wielkopolskie i Kowalsko-Pomorskie, Instytut Nauk o Polityce AXIM oraz być może również niedługo wspólnie kolejne wydarzenia z Papieskim i Królewskim Uniwersytetem Świętego Tomasza w Manili, położonym na Filipinach. Dziękuję bardzo za dzisiejszą uwagę. Thank you very much.